Hey, Laurie,
being treated. Yes.
can you hear me? This is Kim.
Yes. Hi, Kim.
Hi, I'd like to weigh in for a second here.
Oh, sure.
What's quite interesting is they are, of course, not interested in giving you a fair trial because, after I was granted bail, I was so confident in winning my case that my lawyers wrote to the prosecutors in the United States, wrote to the DOJ, and said, I'm on the next plane to the United States as long as some very reasonable conditions are met. I'm now on bail in New Zealand, so I expect bail in the United States. I have been granted by the New Zealand courts that I can use my funds for my legal defense. I would like the same in the United States. And they refused that.
Yeah.
They did not accept that a copyright crime, which of a novel nature, which has never been tried like this in the United States before, would not be sufficient for me to have bail, and that I should have absolutely no funds for my defense. And actually, they went ahead and they seized all my assets, and then they did a civil forfeiture of all my assets by declaring me a fugitive, by saying because I'm legally using my rights to fight extradition to the United States, and which is my treaty right in New Zealand, I'm therefore a fugitive and I cannot even make any attendance in US court via my lawyers to fight for these basic things. So the US system is not at all designed to give you a fair go. They just want to lock you up. They want to win at any cost. And if it means that they have to steal all your money, that you will be left with a public defender who has 180 other cases at the same time in the largest copyright case in history, as they call it, they will destroy you, So I can understand why you are fighting against extradition, and you shall never cease that, and you will see the support only increase, Laurie, and there are a lot of people watching you around the world, loving you, standing by you. You should always remember that in your darkest moments, and we all have them sometimes, that we are all here supporting you. Yeah?
Thank you. It means a lot to hear that, and I am lucky that I have a good support base and understanding parents who, by all rights, could have kicked me out of this house by now for inconveniencing them so much. But your point is absolutely correct. The Department of Justice prosecutors are not in the business of winning fair trials. They will do everything in their power to avoid giving a hearing, because it's hard work collecting evidence and proving a case. Why do that when you can bully someone into signing away their rights and doing your job for you? And in my case, that will be very easy because, as I was getting to, the charges amount to 99 years maximum, and they can say, do you want to take the chance of spending the rest of your life in prison and then a further hypothetical 30 or 40 years, or do you want the 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, I really don't know how much they hate me, deal that we'll give you? And every lawyer would advise me to take the deal because it's suicidal not to. So it's a rigged system, and sadly, tragically, the best way to win is not to play at all. And Aaron Swartz's way out of that was tragic, tragically to end his life. I have no intention of doing that unless I'm forced to. And so my intent is that if I'm to be tried for these offences, which is not necessarily a bad idea, it might be good for a court to hear what the reasons might have been behind this campaign, if they are able to actually link me to it with any evidence, and why perhaps electronic civil disobedience is not necessarily criminal. And there are precedents in the UK, I think also maybe in Australia and New Zealand as well, where activists have, for instance, gone onto an Air Force base, a RAF base in the UK, where B-52 bombers were working and planning to operate and bomb people, and they have destructively disabled them, and they have been convicted on strict liability of breaking the letter of the law, but it was not considered criminal because they didn't have a mens rea, they didn't have a criminal intent. It was a defense of necessity. Their conscience demanded that to prevent a greater harm, they, technically step over this line and engage in civil disobedience. So it's possible to argue this in the UK. In the United States, it would never be possible. And also in the UK, the maximum time that I could spend, I could be given as a custodial sentence for all of the litany of things that I'm accused of being involved in would be 36 months, of which I would serve about 18 months inside. So we don't have great prisons in the UK. I know this because my parents both work in the prison, literally a stone's throw outside of my window. And there's a good chance that unpleasant things would happen to me there. But I've been in there for a few days. I think I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. If it was 18 months, I would be able to come out and contribute meaningfully to society through the security work that I continue to do. The United States, the only purpose that they have for me, and the same for you, Kim, and the same for Barrett and Jeremy Hammond and Chelsea Manning, Leonard Peltier, and various other activists who are in prisons. Their purpose is to be an example, to be a reason for other people not to push back against authority, not to undermine the bully in the playground that is the United States domestically and abroad, and not the people, but the actions of the government, and to oppose, as we're talking about, the spying and the crackdown on civil liberties.
Don't you think, though, Lauri, that may have backfired? I mean, Chelsea Manning has inspired millions. Snowden has said very plainly that Manning impacted him greatly and his decision. So while we might be intended to deter people from speaking up, don't you think that perhaps we are also doing the opposite and inspiring them?
Yes, but it depends on people not being cowed. So in the majority of cases, they step on someone and that person isn't really heard from again and not supported sufficiently. They don't have the solidarity that we're lucky to have, and it is effective, which is why they do it. But when people stand tall and are brave and do have support, like Chelsea, like Barrett, like him, like Edward Snowden, like Julian Assange, and they do not give in and they do not allow themselves to be silenced, then yes, it does backfire, because they effectively give a platform to these people. So I can give interviews to national broadsheet newspapers, and I can be asked to go on BBC television and Sky News and the radio to talk about cyber issues. I would never be considered authoritative on any of these subjects had the United States not significantly polished up my resume, so to speak, by making me out to be the one of the world's most dangerous hackers or something absurd like that. So by the oppression, they can give a voice, and by the way people refuse to accept the oppression and the persecution, that gives power to people. And it is only through struggle that we actually find out what our strength is, what the community that we have is, how resourceful we can be, because we face such strong challenges. So, I don't even necessarily regret at this stage that I'm in this situation, because I'm very much hoping that the precedent that will be set when we win our case, we have a High Court appeal hearing at the end of November, 28th and 29th of November, at the Royal Courts of Justice in the UK, before the Lord's Chief Justice and some lackey judge. I'm hoping that a precedent will be set that never again can the United States seek to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction for alleged non-violent offences. So to put that in simpler terms, if you haven't been to the United States and you didn't hurt anyone, and you might have committed a non-violent crime in another country, then the United States will have to cooperate with that country to prosecute you under the laws that you implicitly agree to abide by. And at no point whatsoever did Kim Dotcom sign up to the copyright law of the United States, and at no point did I sign up to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. In fact, I am a vocal opponent of it for years before I was indicted under it, and it needs to cease to exist. So only America gets to play this game. Only America gets to write some laws and then extend the coverage of those laws to the entire world. And they can only do this because they have power and they're a bully. So they can step in and take over the UK legal process, and the UK seems to be okay with this. You know, at no point have I had a clear answer from the National Crime Agency why, you know, when they were so confident to steal all of my computers and et cetera, and had so much cooperation from the United States, that they couldn't get a charge brought when I've been charged with things that I wasn't even in the same place for before, for political activities. It's very easy to charge someone under UK law. The reason it didn't happen, I have reasonable evidence for it, is the United States obstructed the UK criminal justice process and prevented the Crown Prosecution Service from having a reasonable prospect of a fightable case. So they quite rightfully said, well, you know, we're not going to spend taxpayers' money prosecuting someone if we're not going to get the help we need to achieve it. But sadly, this allowed, again, without any involvement from me or my legal representatives, this allowed me to go from facing a reasonably fair trial where I could argue a case and possibly a 1.5 years in prison, or a suspended sentence, to my life being ruined and probably ended for stupid reasons. And this switch from a relatively humane, functional criminal justice system to the worst criminal justice system outside of the developing world, and significantly better than most parts of the developing, worse than most parts of the developing world, and to 99 years of potential time in prison, just because they wanted to, just because they were like, no, this isn't working, we're not getting the results we want from the UK cops, we'll take this one. And that seems to be okay. So if we win in court, they will be less inclined to do that. And I know for a fact that there are young people with great skill and talent who are not of a criminal disposition that sit after me in the queue, so to speak, waiting to be yoinked. The crackers with attitude, young people who embarrass the director, the deputy director of the FBI, director of the CIA, who were using stupid personal email accounts that were easily phished or social engineered. They're in line. And the reason that our friend and colleague Marcus Hutchins, Malware Tech blog, who saved the day, helped save the day when the WannaCry ransomware worm was had a devastating onslaught on our hospitals, our national healthcare system, and registered the sinkhole domain, that kill switch that stopped the worm from spreading, you know, notably rightly lauded as a hero for that. The reason why they didn't cooperate with the police to have him arrested here for the stupid things they accused him of doing was because the extradition process is already too inconvenient for them. So they waited till he was in Las Vegas and picked him up there. And as I said earlier, he's in jail for the weekend and a $30,000 bail, and he's going to have to go to Wisconsin, which they haven't explained the reason for that venue, and it's probably because they have a corrupt judge or something. So we need to kind of stop this. We need the United States to understand where its borders are and where its jurisdiction is and where its power to enforce its laws ends, which is at those borders, and for it to act in good faith and cooperate under the existing mutual legal assistance treaties with other jurisdictions to have people convicted there if necessary. And in many cases, the United States idea of a necessary prosecution does not accord with what the people here would think is necessary. So we need to put them back in the box. And with all the various other things that are happening with the United States constitutional and political crises at the moment, there's a good chance that the result of our cases and our struggles will be a slightly less crazy system of international abuse and violations of justice. So that's what we hope, at least.
Awesome. Lauri, I want to ask you a question. I actually want to ask everybody on the panel this question, but we'll start with you. What can people do to help you? What are the best ways for them to help you?
Okay, so I'll start with the one that I like the least, because I'm not a big fan of money, but people can contribute if they have money to the Courage Foundation, who is helping with some of the costs and campaigning. So there's a website, freelauri.com, Lauri. But screw money, like there are much better ways that you can help. So that's through raising the awareness of the case. So almost nobody I've met in person, with the exception of a few internet trolls, nobody who understands the case thinks that I should be taken to America and potentially locked up for 99 years for allegedly being involved in an active political process after they ruined somebody else's life for similar reasons and then caused it to end. Nobody thinks that once they understand it. So the more people that understand it, the greater chance, in theory, that it will be seen by the High Court as being absurd. So raising awareness, sharing links and stories, and then writing to politicians. So we actually had a very successful letter writing campaign to the MPs here, which I still don't understand quite how it happens. Courage Foundation, Naomi Colvin, who's amazing, helped sort of work the magic. But in an act that's slightly out of character, 114 members of parliament, so political representatives in the UK, signed a letter to President Obama at the end of last year, saying to the effect, wouldn't it be very nice if you would cede your jurisdiction so that this case can be prosecuted in the UK, because we have a lot of concerns about this person's sort of rights being violated and them potentially coming to an unpleasant end. That's quite momentous in terms of getting political support for a case. I don't think there's a precedent for that many MPs getting on board. Sadly, we didn't hear anything back from Obama. I think he had a lot on his plate at the time, preparing the transition for President Trump. So we're waiting to see if there needs to be further action taken. Unfortunately, we have our own political and constitutional crisis in the UK at the moment, so I haven't had much follow-up from the MPs. At some point, we'll have a debate in Parliament or in another one of the chambers, and eventually the extradition treaty will have to be revisited so that the United States does have to at least show some evidence, or maybe they only request people who are accused of actually hurting people in a real, tangible sense, or maybe they don't extradite. So at the moment, you can't extradite if the offence isn't a crime in the UK. So if the US says if you don't tip your hat to a horse on a Sunday, then you go to prison for 6 months. That's not a crime here, so you can't be extradited for it. I can be extradited because we have the Computer Misuse Act, which is roughly equivalent and just as silly in many ways as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The way the law needs to be changed is, yes, they're parallel offending, parallel kind of accusations, but the sentencing is not at all commensurate. So if the maximum sentence in the UK is 36 months and the possible sentence in the United States extends up to 99 years, then they shouldn't be considered equivalent, and there should be no question of extradition. So this is a very simple change that can be made and will be made in the fullness of time. Mm-hmm.
In my case, it's 88 years.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy.
In New Zealand, and that's the irony, it would only be a civil case, no jail time. And they raided me and arrested me and locked me up for months, and I'm on bail over 5 years. And just like you, I'm reporting to police twice a week. Mm-hmm. I've done so for 5.5 years for a civil copyright.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You're exactly right. What these cases are going to do, they're going to put an end to this expansion of U.S. jurisdiction, the dream of the U.S. empire that they can just arrest anyone around the world and bring them before their courts and have their laws applied to us. Look, we're not living in that crazy system where lobbyists can pay for new laws and create new crimes for which you go to jail for 100 years. We don't have that, neither in Europe or over here in New Zealand, and we should definitely depart from cooperating in any of this nonsense.
And also, it's really important to tie a few of these things up. So the reason why we need to stop the United States from being such a bully and for deciding that it runs things is not just for people like me not wanting to spend their lives in small boxes for stupid reasons, but it's also because the main thing they want to control is the internet. And we know from Edward Snowden that the Five Eyes spying mafia cartel have effectively militarily occupied the internet. So something that we all thought was like the sea, a common good that everyone can use and was under civilian control and was a nice shiny Amazon things, without us really noticing it because they can do it so subtly, that has been occupied, East Germany occupied Afghanistan occupied Iraq. There is a military presence on every bit that matters, on every core router, on every end terminus of every cable carrying all the information. Every internet service provider that handles enough traffic, gets invited to volunteer to have a special box or to have some arrangement so that they can undermine the trust of all of their customers. So, and it's the same with copyright. Aaron Swartz, the reason they stepped on him and tried to make an example of him was because he opposed these terrible legislations that, like you say, were bought and paid for by Hollywood to criminalize non-criminal civil copyright intellectual property issues, to put people in jail, grandmas for sharing music and stuff, just to protect their outdated revenue model, which they need to evolve or die. And their alternative to evolving or dying is to try and fix the game. And because money has power in the United States, they are risking ruining the internet further. And the internet is the single most promising thing, technological artifact that the human civilization has ever created. It gives us the power to become a better superorganism, to overcome divisions of nationality, of geography, of race, ethnicity, of religion, of gender, of sexual preference, etc. To get past the foibles that we had as monkeys, apes, that are not too far away from that kind of mindset, to cooperating and cohesively exploring science and technology and culture and the universe together, which would be great. So many people feel this way, that we're at a fork in the road, that either the internet continues to be this boon for understanding, for connection, for community, for culture, for science, for all the nice things, the humane values, or it becomes a mechanism of totalitarian dystopian control. And at the moment, we are further down that path in the fork in the road, and at a certain point, we won't be able to cross the river between them anymore. So our actions at this bottleneck of civilization, in the trajectory of human civilization, this bottleneck where the slightest change in an action, the slightest difference in an attitude, in the strength of determination, can make an amazing difference in how we come out at the other end, and how our children and grandchildren look back on us as the people that brought about the age of the internet and the revolutionary changes it brings to human society. Will they look back on us and think, why were they so stupid? As people look back on the ones that allowed the rise of fascism, or will they look back and thank us and think that we acted with nobility and honor and foresight and vision, as people think of the founding fathers of America, etc. So we have a huge responsibility to act in that way, that we are here, we are midwives of the birth of a new world, and the way we approach it, the values that we weave into the tapestry of that new system of being human, matter more than anything anyone could have done in a generation before us, and possibly anything anyone could do in the generation after us. And I think that's why so many people of our generation, between the ages of the panelists here, find themselves in these positions. Why Barrett Brown, Jeremy Hammond, Edward Snowden, and myself find ourselves in these positions because we remember when the internet didn't happen, and we were there and saw it happen and saw this revolutionary potential unfold, and then we saw it go away again, and capitalism and control take back that genie and put a lot of it back in the box. And they're not trying to just put the genie back in the box, but to put shackles on the genie and make the genie do nefarious things at their bidding without us knowing. So it's super important what we're doing now, and tying all these threads together and taking the step of actually having an internet party is amazing, because the internet matters more than coal. It matters more than trade in a traditional sense. It matters more than most domestic policy matters. It certainly matters more than your squabble in the backyard over control of some territory. How we do this internet thing is our legacy to history, to posterity. So I just want to applaud you guys for taking the steps of actually formalizing that priority, and to allowing other people to see how we can use the the fantastic developments in culture and technology and ability to organize and share information and to orchestrate collective action, and to show how that can change the political process. And my God, does the political process ever need to be changed, around the world? So I think we're on the right path at the moment.
Beautiful listening to you. Absolutely amazing. And if you want to engage, I don't know if we do have an internet party in the UK yet, but you gotta be in this game. You gotta become active in politics, because everything you just said, from the heart to the heart, this is powerful stuff. This is exactly what we all need to fight for, because they are undermining our rights, our freedoms. They want to cut it all down, gain more control, take over our internet, censor what we can do. And we need to organize, we need to be smart about it. And geniuses like you and Barrett and Julian, we all need to come together and join forces and show them the limitations. Because the internet is a very powerful tool that we should use, and get people involved and get people motivated. The more people understand about these issues, the better it is, the bigger our force against these actions becomes. And you sound like someone who has such a deep understanding of these issues. It would be fantastic if you get involved politically and use your fight and your struggle to get more awareness around these issues. And we need to keep talking. We need to get everyone to understand what's going on here and how it is affecting the rights of everyone around the world, not just in the UK or New Zealand or in the United States. This is a global thing, and the US is driving this, and we need to shut that aggressive action down.
And it's important that people understand that this is not a narrow issue that we have the privilege of considering because we're in the developed world, we're relatively economically secure, etc. It also matters for the people that haven't, that they're in the developing world, or the exploited world, as I think is a more accurate term, because let's take the example of intellectual property. So the developed world, the West, has vast amounts of material wealth, and places in Africa don't. And there's charity, but charity doesn't really help very much. At least with science, we could have even that out a bit, because it doesn't cost anything for scientists in the developing world to be able to access scientific journals. It's just the cost of having things on the internet. And yet still we're having to fight for open access. And I remember bringing this up I used to be a molecular biologist for a bit in Finland, and then we had a conference, and they were talking about how can genetics, how can molecular biology help the developing world. And I said, well, the very first thing you should do is get rid of the intellectual property on the science that you do, so that the things that you can actually freely give to other people without losing the amount that you have yourself can be shared. And simple things like that would help actually harmonize the state of security and comfort and opportunity in the world. And it is that lack of harmony that is creating things like the migrant crisis, which is turning people quite reactionary and xenophobic and inhumane, because these are the natural instincts. When you perceive a lot of people coming to get the nice things that you have and they don't. The internet should be the most effective tool for ensuring that we all have nice things, that the cumulative weight of science, of culture, can be made free to everyone, and that should be a great thing. We just need to get past, again, these outdated ideas that intellectual property is real and that you have an endless right to revenue for some work that you did once. And so that's just one example, but also the opportunity that the internet and technology gives to countries to actually develop and build their economies, and to improve the rights of their people, is revolutionary. And a lot of that is being squandered, because instead of using it for good purposes, it is again used for control. So the GSM technology, the cell phone technology that is now helping amazingly places in the developing world to have access to medical information. You know, Wikipedia is trying to get knowledge to everyone. That's great, but the infrastructure they're using was designed by spies for spying purposes. So they're relying on these cell phone towers that can be controlled by NSA, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, whoever's got an interest in the area, to cause trouble. So we need to get rid of this double-edged sword of the technology and have technologies that are for the benefit of the people and not for the benefit of control of already powerful people that don't have your interests at heart. So we're not only fighting this on a political and legal level, we also have to do the technological fight against centralization, against the accrual of power, against the 3 or 4 or 5 social media network corporations who now basically decide the kind of conversations we have, what we get to see and read and hear about, to have conversations, who we have the conversations with, and none of this is transparent. I don't know why you turned up in my feed today and this other person who found evidence of a serious crime doesn't turn up in anyone's feeds. That's completely opaque, and it's because we don't understand the algorithms that at the moment determine our life, to the point of eugenics, to the point where whoever sits and writes an algorithm at OkCupid decides which pairs of people get to breed at a significant percentage in the population. This is scary as fuck, pardon my language. So we need to put the technology back in the hands of people, open source. And you've done this, you've done amazing stuff with this with Mega, which is, you know, allowing people to share their information using cryptography. Cryptography is the best tool that we have ever since the printing press, since literacy, since pamphlets and writing. You know, caused an amazing political awakening and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Well, cryptography is doing that again in ways that it allows us to take the power back. They, despite their best efforts with these repressive legislations, like in the UK, we have the Investigatory Powers Bill, which in theory means that they can call up Facebook and say, well, you've put some end-to-end encryption or something that looks like it in your messaging feature on WhatsApp, but we need to be able to see anything whenever we want, so please break it. But don't tell your customers, you know, don't tell them that you've undermined fundamentally their trust. We'll just occasionally tap you on the back and break your systems. That doesn't actually work. You can't build a insecure crypto system that's only insecure for the right people. That they're either secure or not. And the maths, as Edward Snowden says, is on our side. The routines, the primitives to securely encrypt things, we don't need Facebook for that. We don't need Twitter for that. We don't need anyone at Google for that. They are burnt into the silicon chips to the extent that we can trust them, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But people can write software so that we can have strong, infeasible to break end-to-end encrypted communications everywhere. And we should be making that the default, because when they lose their ability to run these huge dragnets to just suck up and hoover, as we were hearing before, every bit of conversation, every bit of unencrypted traffic, every text message, every email that's not end-to-end encrypted, and to just chuck them in a huge, massive, electricity, water-hungry data center in the desert inexplicably that keeps going on fire inexplicably. When they can't do that anymore, they'll have to go back to their actual job, which is intelligence, targeted intelligence on bad people. And the misprioritization of this, got to grab it all, got to collect it all, worry about it later, has resulted in deaths in the UK. We had three or four terrorist incidents this year, and in almost all of those cases, the suspect was known to security services. And I don't want to get too cynical or conspiratorial about maybe they were happy for these things to happen. They had been warned, and these people were subjects of targeted surveillance, and instead of monitoring them closely enough with the resources that they might have had if they weren't busy, you know, getting all our sexting on file for them to perversely look at, they could have stopped these things. So actually,
Lauri,
I
have some good news around the topic of encryption, and that is that there is going to be an independent body based in Iceland, which is going to become a third-party encryption provider to a large number of new websites that are providing communication tools, file sharing tools, including what I'm working on now, Bitcash and K.im. And that will be completely outside the reach of the Five Eyes countries. And it will strengthen Iceland as a jurisdiction that provides security and privacy for its citizens, but also for the global community. And as long as we have one jurisdiction in the world where such a third-party encryption provider can exist, none of these local laws can be used to try and create backdoors and try and send a letter to a company that then has to by law build in a backdoor that the users will never know about. All of that will be eliminated by the efforts that some independent groups are currently working on. So that's a beautiful development, and you are absolutely right. Encryption is the way to go, and doing it right means they cannot spy on us, and that will only continue to be utilized, and will make sure that at some stage, and I've said that many years ago, at least half of the internet will be fully encrypted, and we're just going to blind all these people that think they can snoop in on all of our private communications.
And it's good. I mean, the lesson we learned from the first crypto wars, or the first round of the crypto wars, because they never really ended. We just sort of lost our attention and let them steal a march on us. The lesson we learned is it's inherently fragile. When they try to stop the author of PGP from exporting that technology, which allows people to encrypt things securely and message each other, they got away with it for a long time, and then they couldn't, because thanks to the First Amendment, he wrote the code in a book, and they didn't feel confident enough to ban a book in America. So and then the genie was out of the bottle, and everyone was able to use this. And we thought that we'd won and sat on our hands for a bit, and what they did in the meantime was subtly undermine all of the software and do various other nefarious things. So they kind of did. We did have a sort of win, but we didn't check the small print, and they changed it a lot of times to the point that we're now losing again. But like you say, it just takes one. It just takes one exception that cannot be pressured or leveraged or bullied. And Iceland is in the best position to be that. And they've already stood up, they're the only place that's actually jailed its bankers, for causing the financial crash. How has nobody else picked up this fantastic example, in the UK?
And how has the NSA not used their spy cloud to have all this evidence against the bankers that were committing crimes against all of us en masse, making billions of dollars? None of them went to jail, but they have all the evidence to lock them up.
Yeah. It's funny. Prahara, who was my prosecutor before he was sacked by Donald Trump, he's become a bit of like one of these figures in the resistance, whatever. It's all a bit silly. But he's kind of hagiographied and lionized now for standing up to Donald Trump. He didn't stand up to any of these bankers. He was the prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, where Wall Street is. Not a single one of the people that caused the financial global economic crisis, which has allowed, amongst many other places, our government in the UK to exercise crippling austerity for 7 years, to the point where millions and millions queue for food banks in the fourth or fifth most wealthy country in the world, where people like myself with disabilities and mental health difficulties are attempted to be starved to death for begging for the paltry £70 a week they were giving me in disability benefits, because I'm economic undesirable. And it wasn't to save any money. They haven't saved any money with these punitive cruelty towards benefit claimants. It's just an ideology so that they can scapegoat some people, so they can justify destroying the state, taking away public services. And they're only able to do this because there was an economic crash, and the poor bore the burden of that and continue to bear the burden of that, whereas the people who are responsible for it were bailed out, continue to be bailed out, still award themselves ridiculous bonuses. And I don't really do anything particularly useful. So I'm happy that, amongst other things, you're working in cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies allow us to get rid of these parasites in finance, in central banking, and actually leverage technology.
I mean, it's already underway. You know, we're going to destroy all these banks. We're going to crack this whole elite establishment system apart, and they don't even see it coming. You know, and it's already happening. So what I'm doing with Bitcash, what other people are doing in the space is amazing. The blockchain is changing the game like nothing else. It's basically like the internet. You know, I was excited in the 90s about the internet, and nothing excites me more than blockchain now. You know, I mean, it's just beautiful. So yeah, we're going to beat them. You know, it's just no way. I mean, they're going to hit out and launch out and try and stop all these things. But like you said, it's math. You know, they can't do math.
Yeah, and it is also a sign of their weakness that they resort to, you know, trying to ruin your life and kidnap you and turn a civil matter, if there was any civil matter to begin with, into a criminal thing. And again, to make an example of me, to silence me and put me in a small box for the rest of my life. Partially they're doing that because they're vindictive, unpleasant people, but the main reason is because they're afraid and they're weak. And so they know that they can't win the technological battle unless they subvert the people that run the technology. They can't win the argument on the merits for undermining the internet, because people rightly acknowledge that it is better as a public good. It is better not in the control of one party. It's better that it isn't balkanized and nationalized, that it's a shared resource that's not, you know, under military occupation. That's quite an easy argument to win with people who are not vested in that control. So they resort to silencing and oppressing the people that are fighting for those freedoms. And that should always be an indication that you're doing the right thing. You know, when they're trying to strongly inconvenience your life and your friends and your colleagues and comrades' lives, what you're doing, you're probably doing the right thing. You know, so you should keep it up, and
will look
we should support each other.
In a few decades, people will look
yes.
the story of Edward Snowden, and the story of Julian Assange, and the little contributions that you and I and Barrett and other people like us are making to this history, which is currently written. They will look back at this and they will understand how important this time was, how important it was that the truth came out about these systems, how important it is that a group of people formed and it grew stronger and bigger, and the effort to stop these things grew stronger and bigger. And in the end, I believe we're going to win. We're going to turn this thing around. They will not get away with this. And, you know, I'm proud to be part of this movement. And, you know, we just all need to keep going. As much pressure as they put on us, it should encourage us to speak even louder, to fight even harder, because in the end, they can't prevail with this complete destruction of our human rights.
Exactly. I mean, the phrase that I always tell people is the most important thing you can do is to speak truth to power, because power cannot continue to exert itself in places where it is oppressive in the presence of truth. You know, it's only through ignorance. The only reason the NSA, GCHQ, the Five Eyes were able to get away with subverting the internet, to sucking up all of our communications, was because people didn't know. And had people known at the time, then they would have pushed back and it would have been harder to achieve. And sadly, since Edward Snowden, they've ratcheted in a lot of these things because they've done so much that there wasn't enough outrage to actually push it back far enough. And so perversely, they've been able to solidify a lot of the things that they've taken away and the things that they've subverted in the UK. And so we have to keep pushing back because it's progressively harder to undo these things in the legal framework. You know, what they think they can get away with. We can win the battle technologically. So In many ways, it's better to actually produce better technology than to waste too much energy reforming through the legal systems, at least in places where the political system and legal system is broken, which is sadly the USA and the UK, which are the two of the main offenders. In other places like New Zealand, you are making some progress. The courts are still somewhat independent, and they will recognise that the law has been broken with the illegal spying.
It's going quickly, my friend. Even in New Zealand, I mean, at the outset, I was quite hopeful that there is an independent judiciary here. But when you see the gamemanship and the chess moves that the Attorney General over here does to remove judges that are critical about my case from my cases, the Attorney General has so far removed 3 judges that have ruled in my favor and has promoted people that have ruled against me. And it's really quite interesting to see how the justice system is not really doing justice in the light of what's obviously corrupt and wrong. Most of the New Zealand population understand that the case against me is a sham. That is what the opinion of most New Zealanders is. Yet the courts still feel, a certain, I would say, patriotism, where they say, well, let the US deal with this. Just ship him away. If he has a strong case, well, bring it in the US, deal with it there. We don't want to be seen as this country that has made this mistake. It's better for us to extradite him and let him deal with it in the United States. But what these judges don't understand is that the price for that logic is that the moment I arrive in the United States, I will be locked up for many years. I will be separated from my family. I have 5 young children. I will not see them for a very long time. I will be defenseless because all my assets have been forfeited in a completely unlawful, ridiculous way that would never even be possible in New Zealand. You cannot declare someone a fugitive and steal all their assets without a single hearing, without ever having heard the merits of the case. So, the problem that I'm facing is the judiciary over here is becoming more and more compliant with what is required politically to give to the US empire and what the political powers in New Zealand desire to give and be rewarded by being part of the Five Eyes, by getting economic benefits. And, they are happily trading away the rights of New Zealanders as a cost for that. And let me give you one example. Just recently, through court proceedings, it came out that the NSA was involved directly in the spying on me in New Zealand. And the GCSB had to admit in court that prior affidavits that they had filed of the ending date of the surveillance, where they said this all ended basically a month after the raid, after the investigation started. On the day of the raid, they said they terminated the spying. And now it came out that it went on for another 2 months. And so that the GCSB, the spy agency here, cannot be charged with perjury for lying in these affidavits. They are now claiming that a third party has used their GCSB systems to continue the interception of my communications without their knowledge. And the only third party that would be capable of doing that is the NSA, and the only third party that would have any interest in that data anyway is the United States, because they were the ones that brought the case against me. And here's the disgusting part about this. The New Zealand government passed much more intrusive laws for the GCSB, making the prior illegal conduct legal by just one vote in parliament. Now imagine if New Zealanders would have known at the time that the NSA can use the GCSB sensors directly to spy on New Zealanders without the knowledge of the GCSB, do you think that law would have passed? So just by lying, by covering things up, by claiming national security considerations, when they keep these things secret, they are completely betraying the citizenry of New Zealand and lying to the people here. And my fight is about all of that coming out and becoming clear. And what we're working on here today and in the coming few months is to establish new legislation that is going to prohibit this kind of conduct. How could the New Zealand government give the NSA a key to the communications of all New Zealanders and then allowing the NSA to spy on New Zealanders without the knowledge of the GCSB? That is a question of independence, sovereignty, and that will be answered over here in New Zealand in the next few years that I will be fighting my legal battles. But that is what's going on. Just with lying, with keeping us in the dark, with redacting, with not giving us discovery, with not giving us our legal information that we are entitled to, they are able to expand their powers and their lies. And ultimately it will all come crushing down because this house of cards that they have built, I mean, the insiders know that Five Eyes is really only set up to allow the US, through the other four partners, to subvert the US law to spy on their own citizens. The same for New Zealand. If the New Zealand government wants to look into a New Zealander, all they have to do is type in the email address or phone number of a New Zealander into the NSA spy cloud, and there it is, the entire surveillance product available about that person. That is subverting and hacking the laws that were nationally created to protect the citizens from that very conduct of these spy agencies. So, my case is probably the only one in the world right now where we can go through the court process and uncover exactly what they have done. And by showcasing it, in my case, people will understand that this applies internationally and how important it is that we wind these powers back and expose the crimes that have been done. And if we ever get to that point, a lot of people will go to jail, and it will not be you or me.
Yeah, and it's necessary. It's it raises some really important points. I've used the word sovereignty a lot, but the Five Eyes system, these intelligence agencies are not beholden to the state that they work for. They're certainly not beholden to the citizens that they claim to be work for, whose taxpayer money they use. The Five Eyes system acts in a way autonomously as an international mafia, as an international cartel and a racket. And like you say, if governments refuse to cooperate, if the courts refuse to defer, to allow them to get away with lying, to not retroactively legalize. We've had this in the UK when GCHQ has actually been found by the court very rarely to have broken the law. All they do is they say the reason why they're breaking the law is because they didn't have a good enough policy, but they've written a policy now, so actually it's legal, and we're not going to give any consequences for the fact that it was illegal for all this time. So that's the usual way these things go when we win, even. But it works like a racket in that nobody. This national church of national security, the false idol of national security, means that governments can use it as an excuse when rights are being violated. So we have the case of terrible things happen in Saudi Arabia all the time. They're a reprehensible, barbaric government. They execute political protesters, non-violent political protesters. One in particular reached a threshold of public awareness that David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, was questioned about it. Why doesn't the Foreign Commonwealth Office say, can you please not crucify, literally they were going to crucify this kid who was under 18 at the time that he was accused of being involved in these protests. David Cameron, in a moment of frankness, in a moment of candor, said, if we do not, if we kick up too much of a fuss against Saudi Arabia, they will withhold intelligence from us, and that means there's more chance of a terrorist incident occurring. And I can tell you, because I don't care about getting sued, that's not exactly what they mean. What Saudi Arabia means is, we will make sure some terrorism happens in your country if you don't cooperate. It's not that they will not share the information. They control the terrorists around the world indirectly through the system of Wahhabism, but they can certainly make it very likely that you will have a bombing or a stabbing or people driving into people on a bridge or whatever stupid things they do. And so it's a cartel, it's a racket, and it means that we don't have rights. This notion that the nation state is the defender of the rights of its subjects and citizens, there might have been some merit to it at some point, but with regards to these spy agencies, it's completely meaningless. We are product, we are farms for intelligence, and this is sold and traded on a kind of black market to get access to other information, or to get political favors, or to project power and influence in some backwater or developing parts of the world. So it's not just subverting our rights, it's subverting democracy around the world. It is ossifying and calcifying these power relations, this colonialism, this imperialism that leads to the corruption and the violence in other parts of the world. So I can walk down the street and not worry about being shot or stabbed or something here in the UK, but part of the reason why I have that privilege and luxury is because we export disorder and we export instability to other parts of the world, and we're quite happy to benefit from that, to maintain our position as the privileged, as the top dogs, as the ones who get the benefits of the trade, as the ones who don't have to pay for the grain, for the oil at a fair price, etc. So when we fix these things, when we stop the spy agencies from acting without any accountability, without not fettered by any laws or moral decency, to allow this imperialism and this subversion of democracy and rights around the world, I think we'll see a great change in the speed at which societies develop, because we have this fundamentally racist idea that the reason there is corruption in Africa or parts of Asia is because they're less civilized, because they needed the colonialists to show them how democracy works. It's not the case. It's because a lot of money is made from maintaining that corruption. And it's
there's the very problem, isn't it? Because business needs to grow, more money needs to be made, more profits need to be made. So this apparatus of spying and the private intelligence companies are growing. They are incentivized to do more, to create more scenarios where they can, spy on us. And it's just like the private US prison system. It's a business. It needs to grow. More people need to be locked up to make more profit. That is really what drives this whole thing. It's money and power.
Wow, just wow.
Guys, that was unbelievably incredible. I'll let you talk and talk, because every single thing that is being said is completely spot on. Particularly what Lauri was saying about the military threat to the internet. And when we talk about a military threat, the military are the true rulers of the Western world, and the military are not unique to their one nationality. And this is what is proven by what Kim is explaining about the NSA using the GCSB spy tools. The GCSB has more loyalty to the NSA, I believe, than they have to New Zealand. And I completely agree that the political system and even the legislature in New Zealand are unable to rein in or control the military. So the military of the Five Eyes has become the supreme entity of all 5 countries. And the political system exists only to convince people that they do have a democracy and they do still have sovereignty. But New Zealand exists, as I once wrote, only in our memories and in its name. Unfortunately, New Zealand is as much America right now as America is. And I believe it's the same for all of the Five Eyes. And that is, when we're talking about sovereignty, we are fighting to regain our own countries and control and say over our own countries. Because at present, if a government came into power in New Zealand that tried to extricate ourselves from that, the military would flex their muscle and they would get rid of that government by whatever means necessary, so that they could reassert their power and their control. So that's how huge this fight is. This fight is not just about votes or an election, unfortunately. It is not even just about educating people, because we did that with the GCSB movement in 2013. 90% of New Zealand stood against that bill. We had 25 towns and cities marching. We had the #1 political TV show in the country talking about the issues every single day, and we still couldn't effect change. And the reason for that is because the political system is not serving us, even when our entire country doesn't agree with what they're doing. So I think the other key points too that I took away from that was where Lauri was talking about the homogenization of technology. We have billions of people using 2 mobile systems. Do you ever stop and think to yourself why there is only 2 major mobile operating systems being used by the entire planet? Our tech luminaries, the people who develop alternatives, are either bought for cash or they are crushed. And they are targeted and they are crushed, and that is to prevent competition. And we saw that with the infiltration of Mega. We've seen that with many examples. The military, or the Five Eyes, do not like Aaron Schwartzes of this world. They do not like unknown quantities. They do not like competition. They do not like innovation. And so they target people who are innovators, specifically to maintain their own status quo. Now, we've run way over time with all the talking to date, but I'll tell you what, I've seen everything that there is in the public realm to see about Kim, about Lauri, about Barrett, and what I've never, ever, ever seen is them getting to interact with each other and just talk about issues in free form. So what we have just experienced is a total first. It is a total first, and it's really, really special.
This is great. You're absolutely right. And we need to get Ed in here. We need to get Julian in here. We need to make this a common thing where we talk about recent developments. I'm so happy to meet Barrett for the first time, to see Lauri for the first time. This is a great start. And we need to increase the circle, invite more people to join this discussion. I think this is very powerful, and thank you so much for making that happen, Susie.
You're so welcome. So we've just been discussing together that we've decided we're going to make this fortnightly for the next 2 months. So every 2 weeks, we're going to have a round table, and we're going to invite
up to speed.
Just named and all of our other compatriots who are involved in this struggle. And we're going to progressively together discuss these issues and then work on the bill.